You're listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, giving you weekly sports analysis, opinions, and discussion. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and J-Raff.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 198th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays, alongside of me, co-host Justin Raffoff.
Yeah, it's good to be here, and this is an exciting weekend. A lot of people call this one of the best football weekends because even though you have the same number of NFL games as last weekend, you have the four. You have the divisional games, so you have the 1s and 2 seeds playing this week. So, a lot to talk about. I like this weekend. This weekend really started to stick out for me, and it's popped up as a reminder on my phone the other day. Friday was actually 6 years to the day that we had gone to Vegas, some college friends, and we were there for the divisional round, and it was a lot of fun to be out there for those 4 awesome games.
A lot of money changing hands, I'm sure.
Yeah, not so much of ours.
Not so much of your
right,
guys,
yeah. But when we're going together to do like a $30 parlay on like all 4 games, and we have the guy in front of you is counting out $1,000, put on a bet, and we're like, yes, we'd like to parlay the Cardinals, the Saints, or just talk about a bunch of different things. It was funny.
So here we are, divisional round playoffs here. Like Justin said, 4 games, 8 teams left. Well, now after yesterday's games, that's not true anymore. And I don't know. We might be able to stick a fork in another one.
I was going to say, soon to be another team eliminated.
So we're going to talk about all the games from yesterday. The Patriots' victory over the Chiefs in Foxborough was in the first game yesterday evening. Then last night there was a thriller out in Arizona that saw the Cardinals come out on top over the Packers in overtime.
Amazing finish to the game. It really, and I heard people talk about this, it wasn't that amazing of a game the whole way through. Like, it wasn't like both sides were playing particularly well, but the ending was insane, and that's kind of what people will definitely remember for a long time.
When you got here and I asked you, did you watch the Green Bay Arizona game, and you said just the end, and I was like, oh, you saw the good part.
Literally turned it on at when Green Bay had 1st and 10 from their own 2 or something like that. It was way back. They were way backed up. So.
I saw the first half and maybe into the third quarter, and it was boring. And I was actually really disappointed when the Packers took the lead. Not that I really have anything against the Packers, but it's the Cardinals. How often have they been there? I cheer for Carson Palmer and some of the other guys out in Arizona.
You may have heard this now, but the Cardinals have continued their streak. The Arizona Cardinals have never lost a home playoff game. I think they've only had 5, but they won all 5, yes.
Well, then they were not hoping for or like everyone else expecting the outcome that's going on right now in Carolina.
Yeah.
That's a game that we'll talk about as well. The number 1 seeded Panthers, who, had off last week, the bye, being the best team in the NFC during the regular season. They're hosting the 6 seed Seahawks, who probably shouldn't even be in this game, which they're technically, I guess, kind of not. But really, if you look back on it, if Blair Walsh makes an easy kick, I think shorter than, the new extra point, the Vikings would have been in Arizona and Green Bay would have been in Carolina.
Yeah, I think the new extra point tends to be 32 yards, I believe.
And that field goal was 27,
right, and now it was 27, so it was 5 yards shorter. And there was plenty of talk about that. He owned it. I still can't really believe that that's how that played out. However, so Seattle, and this was interesting because Seattle went back west, which I understand, and then they flew all the way east to play the early game. Now, I know earlier this week, people were talking about that, and they're like, well, Seattle already went to Minnesota, and I'm like, yeah, Minnesota's not the East Coast. That's like flying halfway from Seattle. And then, they were talking about some other thing. They went somewhere else and won a game on the East Coast, but they played a terrible team, whoever it was. I forget who it was. And so when you look at their their score here, obviously it's a little shocking to get into it. They're down 31-0.
Yeah, it's 31-0
with 6.5 minutes left in the second quarter.
They just got the ball back after Carolina scored a touchdown. I think it was almost a 20-yard pass from Cam Newton to Greg Olsen.
And I think, it's just from what I saw at the beginning of the game before we got on, Carolina is just dominating in every sense of the word. Like, they look like the perfect reason why, like, for the bye. You know, teams are always like, oh, do you want the hot team to have off? You know, and they, well, look at this team. They were, you know, I think that the strain of playing all those games in a row, you know, kind of won them. They got the week off. Seattle had to go and play in the frigid Minnesota air, win a game they probably shouldn't have won, at least on that last, you know, they should have made the field goal and lost, and then fly home and fly back east. Like, not that that's the cause of everything. It could just be that the Panthers are better than them. The Panthers beat them in the regular season in Seattle.
In Seattle, right.
So the Panthers might just be better, but I don't know that. It's hard to believe that. It's hard to believe that any team in the divisional round is 31-0 better than another team.
Right, because you look at the two games from yesterday.
In 25 minutes of game time.
Each game was decided by a touchdown or a tiny bit less.
Right.
It really would have been. Actually, it would have been the exact same score if it would have been. Right. You know, if you kicked the extra point.
You have, in the Chiefs game, you know, there was an onside kick try, and that essentially ended the game. And in the Cardinals game, it was a walk-off win. You know, which you don't get often in football.
So does that mean that tonight's game's also going to be a massive blowout in favor of the home team?
I don't know.
So a week after the 4 road teams win, do we see all 4 home teams?
I think it's a possibility that 4 home teams win. I don't think the last game's a blowout. Honestly, and I know this is crazy, and I know people don't agree. I think if it's a blowout, I think the Steelers win. Like, I'm honestly, I want the Broncos to win, but I don't know that they're going to. I feel like, you know, we've used this line a lot. I feel like I've seen this movie before. Everything's in favor of Peyton Manning and the Broncos and Peyton Manning's team in the playoffs. And the other team's nicked up, and the other team, you know, well, teams rally around that, you know, like I don't know. I'm not a believer in the Broncos defense either. Like I've seen them play too terrible at key times this year. They whooped up and shut down some bad teams or when teams weren't going, and some decent teams. But Pittsburgh had their way with that defense for the last 3 quarters of the game when they played them last time. Now, I know of the 190 passing yards or something like that, 180 were Antonio Brown or something absurd. But it just, we talked a little bit about this last week. As much as I want Denver to win, I'm kind of in the mode of I'll believe it when I see it in terms of Pittsburgh losing.
Right.
Like, you know, honestly, the only one that I feel really would have mattered, like if they would have had Antonio Brown and D'Angelo Williams but didn't have Ben Roethlisberger, then I'd be feeling more comfortable that the Broncos are going to win. But because they have Ben and don't have the other two, Ben's the most important of those 3. Like, it's just
the quarterback is always the most important.
That's just
player.
The way it is. That's just the way it is.
Denver's 4 losses this year, 2 of them were, I'd say, okay losses just because they were to a good team. But then your other 2 losses, they lost to Oakland where they could only put up 12 points.
Right.
And they lost to, what was the other bad loss? Indianapolis by a field goal. Now, that one was on the road, but the Oakland one was in Denver. That was kind of more of a surprise.
Yeah.
The next week they lost to Pittsburgh, and sprinkled in there was also the loss to Kansas City, which Kansas City ended the year on an 11-game winning streak if you count the first round of the playoffs. Right. So that's not a terrible loss, but to lose at home twice is a little bit surprising,
basically
especially
what it comes down to is can Denver's offense under Peyton Manning play like they did for the last quarter and a half of the game against San Diego? Can they resemble that at all against Pittsburgh? And there's a couple factors there. One, I don't know that you can sustain it over the course of a whole game. All right. And 2, the Steelers defense, while not good, is infinitely better than the San Diego defense, which San Diego was just terrible. Like, that's one where McCoy kept his job, and I agree with that. We're big proponents of stability in programs here, but I could understand because it wasn't a little step back for them this year. The step back that they took was almost just as bad as the Eagles' step back, in my opinion. Like, they were a good team last year, and they were awful this year. And the same thing for the Eagles. Chip Kelly gets fired, you know. Now, I know the situation's a little different with GM powers and all that other stuff, but I don't know that Denver has what it takes to. I don't know, to score enough against Pittsburgh.
Looking at Denver's schedule makes me almost want to change my pick from Denver to Pittsburgh, because looking back on this, when was the last time that Denver looked good? Early November?
Yeah.
They lost to the Colts. They lost to the Chiefs. They squeaked by the Bears. Now they beat the Patriots. That's a good win.
Right.
Now it was at home though.
Right.
They beat the Chargers, okay, by 2 scores. Okay, fine. They lose to Oakland.
In Denver.
They collapse against Pittsburgh.
Right, they're up against Pittsburgh and lose.
They beat Cincinnati with a backup quarterback, barely.
Right.
They beat San Diego, barely.
Right.
They have a bye this week.
Right.
So,
now the tough thing for me there is since November 15th though, Peyton Manning didn't really play in those games.
He didn't play.
He got
until
pulled in that
January
November
3rd.
15th game, and he didn't come back in until the end of the January 3rd game. So, is there struggles before that? Well, because if you look at it before, even when they struggled, like, all right, they beat Kansas City. That's a better win than they probably got credit for in the second week of the season. But they struggled with Baltimore week 1. They beat Detroit in week 3. They beat Minnesota in week 4. That's a better win than probably a lot of people thought they were going to get. Then they struggled with Oakland. The surprising thing with the Oakland scores, they only scored 28 combined points between the 2 games. Like, Oakland was good this year, but it wasn't necessarily that they were shutting teams down. Their defense at times played really well, but they only gave up 28 points in 2 games to Oakland or to Denver. That's really good for Oakland. Then they barely beat Cleveland. Then they have the bye. Then they beat Green Bay. But again,
Green Bay
coming
was
out
swooning
right,
at that time too,
right,
and coming off a bye.
Right, and there's Denver coming out of the bye, and that's where you get into this: is the bye big enough to let Peyton Manning play like he needs to, and are they going to be able to run the ball in this Kubiak offense? Because that's the talk: is that this time off has let Peyton Manning really learn the Kubiak offense, and he's going to take snaps under center more than he has ever. If they can do that, well, that's what they absolutely need to do, obviously, if they want to have any shot. So, well, I say any shot. They're 7-point favorites in this game. But I don't know.
Well,
I just don't think it's the sure thing. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Denver wins. I want Denver to win. It wouldn't surprise me if they win. I just think that people are writing off the Steelers because of their injuries.
I'm
and I'm like,
certainly not.
Right. No way. No way.
I know Antonio Brown's a big part of that offense, but you're telling me that Martavis Bryant, Marcus Wheaton...
Antonio Brown is a big part of the offense because of Ben Roethlisberger.
Right.
Because when Ben Roethlisberger isn't in, Antonio Brown disappears. It doesn't matter who the backup is. When it was Mike Vick, when it was Landry Jones, it does not matter. Antonio Brown can't get open. He gets open and gets the ball when Ben Roethlisberger is there.
We're not talking... and Antonio Brown had an incredible year because of Ben.
He's great. Don't get me wrong, but he's great, and he has a great quarterback.
Well, look what DeAndre Hopkins did in Houston with 4 different quarterbacks. That's a great wide receiver.
Yes.
And I'm not saying Antonio Brown's not a great wide receiver. It's just his production has been a lot more dependent on Big Ben, the great quarterback, rather than who else was there. DeAndre Hopkins did it with 4 different guys. He had a 100-yard receiving game with 4 different quarterbacks this year.
Yeah. That's insane.
So we're going to talk more about the upcoming Broncos-Steelers game that starts at, I think, 4:40, about 4.5 hours away. 2.5 hours away from right now. I can't math at the moment. So, kind of like Pat last night. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that game just here in a bit, but we're going to recap the Saturday ones first. Before we do any of that, we do want to remind everyone that this is an interactive show. There's multiple ways that you can contact us, and Justin has that information for you.
Yeah, we'd love to have your take on any of the games that happened yesterday or on any of the things that are going on today, either currently or as we kind of move into the late game. So as we look at this, we'd love to have you call the show. You can call the show using the Mace Sandwich Shop hotline at 530-563-6297. Again, 530-563-6297. You can also email the show anytime using the Maze Sandwich Shop email inbox at joemazeandjraff@gmail.com. Again, joemazeandjraff@gmail.com.
We also have presence on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us on there. Just look for facebook.com, Joe Maze and J-Raff Show, and on Twitter at Joe Maze and J-Raff, at JMNJR_radio, at JMFlyer1454, or at Mr_Raffoff will get you all kinds of stuff from us and the shows and whatnot. So give us a follow on Twitter. Now we are going to head up the May Sandwich Shop email inbox with an email from last week's show about Wild Card Weekend from my uncle, who says he misread and wasn't sure what time we were starting last week. So he missed the beginning of the show. So we are going to read that email now. All right, so Rich says, to answer your question, you always want to play any team in your house. My reason for saying that all the home teams will win is because of all the injuries to Pittsburgh. The Patriots have problems playing in two places, Denver and Miami. Denver I can almost understand. Miami just doesn't make any sense. I do think a healthy Pittsburgh would be a harder game here than playing in Denver, but we will take whoever we get. A lot of people say do not overlook Kansas City. To go with Justin's your feelings, the only two teams I don't want in the Super Bowl are Seattle and Pittsburgh, and to think they both should have lost last weekend.
That's fair enough, Rich.
I think all of his points are completely valid.
Yeah, I would agree.
Of them. You want to play. You always want to play in your house. Like, so
right.
Bringing that up is kind of,
But he also addresses like that. Even he, as the Patriots fan, wanting to play there, thinks that playing at Denver may be a better matchup for the Patriots than playing at home against the Steelers. But if in these games where those separations are probably so small, you want to have the advantage of playing at home at your own stadium and have everything that goes along with that.
Right, and since we know the outcome of his game yesterday, we know that they will get the opportunity to play in their 10th AFC Championship game in the Brady-Belichick era.
I think 10th in the last 15th year.
Fifth consecutive AFC Championship game. And we don't know if it'll be in Foxborough or if they'll have to go to Denver, all pending the game results tonight. I also don't understand why they can't beat Miami in Miami every few years. It's not like it's every year, but like we saw this year, right. Miami ended their hopes of being the number one seed and guaranteeing themselves a home game. He says a healthy Pittsburgh would be a harder game. Don't overlook Kansas City, and as we saw as a result of the game yesterday, they didn't overlook them, but it's a good thing they didn't because
Kansas City was a
legitimate
worthy
opponent. Yep,
yeah,
definitely. And something bounces the other way, or maybe you flip flop where it played. If that game's in Kansas City, maybe that little.
How big is that? Like Kansas City almost came on to win that division, which would have changed all the matchups and everything. And they would have been hosting a game this weekend as opposed to probably hosting a game this weekend instead of playing on the road. But yeah, I mean. Kansas City, I think they're heading in the right direction. They fell behind a little early, which was a big problem. But
yeah, so we thank Rich for that email again, contacting the show, and you can do that every week during the show or at any point when we're not online. Mays Sandwich Shop email inbox is Joe Mays and J-Raff at gmail.com. All right, so let's start with that Kansas City Chiefs New England Patriots game from yesterday evening. We saw the result 27-20 in favor of New England. They're going back to the AFC Championship game again. And, you kind of mentioned the crux of the issue for Kansas City was going down so early. They went down 7-0 quickly. They think they made it 7-3, but then they were down 14-3. They might have actually been down. Were they down 21-3, or did they cut it to 14?
I don't know.
No, I think it was 14-6.
Yeah,
if I recall, trying to watch it while we were at dinner last night.
And then it was 21-6, and then I think 21-13.
Yep. And then they went up 27-13.
Right.
And cut it to 27-20. They tried an onside kick. The Chiefs did. It went right to Gronkowski.
Right.
It wasn't a great onside kick. They haven't had a successful onside kick, I think, since 2009.
I know, everybody's ripping Andy Reid because it took the Chiefs too long to score, in the end of the game. But to me, they scored and they had the chance for the onside kick. That's all you could really ask for.
Right.
That.
I mean,
if they would have
gotten the ball back in time,
right?
They could have.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
See,
I think that only pops up because Andy Reid took so much flack in Philadelphia for time management.
Well, and people did say so. They have it. They're down 2 scores, and there's 2:35 left when they run a play, and they only get 1 play off before the 2-minute warning. Okay, fair enough. But when they score and still have a chance to, oh man, I thought the Seahawks were driving.
They were. I don't know what happened. Let's see if I can figure it out.
But anyway, when we're looking at, maybe they went for it on fourth down.
They must have gone for it on fourth down.
But anyway, when we, when you look at kind of what Kansas City did, they were scored. They just didn't, score enough, and they gave up probably, too many early. Patriots did exactly what you kind of expect them to do. They're not going to try and run it in this situation. They just sat back there and made short pass after short pass after short pass. And Kansas City's great pass rush couldn't get to them.
Right.
And so when you have those situations, it's going to be one of those things where it just isn't going to really work out. It's not a great situation for Kansas City, and they struggled there, as we saw kind of later on. I don't really know. I'm just trying to think there. I really don't know if that is a big surprise. I know some people looked at Kansas City on that long win streak, and they are. But, to go into New England, you have to play a virtually perfect game. And there's no way anybody's going to argue that Kansas City played a perfect game yesterday.
No.
I'd say they played a B-plus game. And you go in there
They played good enough to be in the game, but not good enough to win.
And good enough to beat other teams, especially during the regular season. But,
Oakland, San Diego, Denver
now,
at
again,
times.
A lot of this is dictated by your opponent, but Kansas City played better last week than they did this week. They're playing a lesser opponent.
Right.
I understand that, but at the same time, they needed their A game this week to have a shot. You need to have your A game and get some help from New England generally to beat New England in New England, and that isn't what happened.
You can't turn the ball over, and I think the Chiefs only had one turnover, but it was a fumble, and right there, you needed that one extra possession.
Right.
Like that. Right. I'm not going to say that's the reason they lost, but it's one of the contributing factors.
And it's Niles Davis, who is known for fumbling.
Right.
And that's part of why
he had that
huge
kickoff return last week against the Texans for the touchdown, but now you give him the rocket.
Right. The reason he lost out to Sharkhandrick West, though, a lot of it is because he has a history of fumbling. And I heard it this morning. There was the knock on him in college. It was the knock on him in high school, in going into college. He can't hold on. Not that he can't. He fumbles a lot. Right. For a guy who wants to be a big-time running back.
Tom Brady threw for 302 yards and 2 touchdowns. The interesting stat, I think, is that the Patriots only had 14 rushing attempts for 38 yards. They did get one touchdown on the ground. That was by Tom Brady.
Part of that, though, could be what let Kansas City back in this game. The fact that they couldn't run the ball.
Well, we've known for a number of years, probably since the streaking that the Patriots did in 07 with Randy Moss and when they went undefeated in the regular season, they were a much different passing type of team then.
Yeah.
Then Brady got hurt in 08. When he came back in 09, I don't want to say they're not vertical and all and can't score on big plays, but they use their short passing game as their running game.
Right. Which hurts you when Edelman has 3 drops in the first quarter of the game.
Well, we saw in Week 17 against the Dolphins, that didn't work. It didn't work when they tried to run the ball, I should say, because they tried to use the running game instead of the passing game, and it wasn't working. I mentioned they had 14 rushes. 6 of them were by Brady.
Right.
And I'm sure those weren't designed rushes either. No. They just ended up being rushes.
Right. So that's one of those where, they only had 8 rushes by running backs or wide receivers. Because Edelman had one. Edelman had their long run.
Their longest run, 11 yards.
Yeah, so you would think against Pittsburgh maybe not Pittsburgh. I don't know. I would say Kansas City has a better defense than Pittsburgh. However, Pittsburgh has a much better offense than Kansas City. Not
to take anything away, because Alex Smith played good enough, but this is the story of his career. He played good enough.
Right.
He completed more than 50% of his passes. He had 246 yards. He had a touchdown. He didn't turn the ball over.
He ran for 44 yards.
Right.
So
he did it. They didn't capitalize when they needed to, but Niles Davis fumble, was really debilitating. Yeah. But there are obvious flaws in the Patriots game.
Yeah.
And as we move into the AFC Championship game and then the Super Bowl the next week, should they win, someone's going to exploit their inability to rush the ball, or what looks like possibly the only contributor. If you shut down Gronkowski, is that team done?
Yes.
Because they can't run the ball.
Gronkowski isn't healthy. He was he had to get more treatment on his knee and his back is hurt.
Well, and I think Edelman is questionable for next week now.
Yeah,
actually he could even be doubtful for next week now.
Yeah, that could be a problem.
They moved on. That's great for them, but I can't say, whether you're going to play in Denver or host the Steelers. How confident are you that you can get that win? Maybe because of the past 15 years, you're like, I have no doubt that we're going to win that game.
Right.
And I don't consider that cocky. That's confidence because there's proof that that's the way it is.
It's based on evidence. It's not just your way of thinking. It is based off of results.
You want to see cocky turn on Fox and see them getting the crap beat out of them right now.
Yeah, but again, to go to never mind. I thought you meant the Panthers. You mean Seattle?
I mean Seattle.
Yeah.
Carolina's the new Seattle.
I almost said this morning, like, I was wondering how long into this game or how far into this game before we saw a Seattle defender do the Superman, like taunt basically of Cam Newton. I'm not so sure we're going to see that today.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh man,
I would say probably not.
Yeah, it's 105 left in the first half in Carolina. Seattle Panthers got the ball, drove it a little bit, and then had to punt. So a minute 5 left, and basically Seattle needs a score here. They do get the ball to start the second half, so that they could score. You never know. Like I've seen crazier. I don't know that I've seen crazier things, but you've seen crazy things, and we're about to get to some crazy things in just a second.
Yeah,
you've seen crazy things, but Could Seattle score 31 points or 32 essentially, because they would need 32 at a minimum? Yes. Can they score 32 without giving up any more to Carolina? That's really tough, because that's how you have to look at this. Can they outscore Carolina 32 by 32 points over the next 20 or 31 minutes of football? You know, that's a really tall task.
Can they? Yes. Will they? No. I think Carolina is going to host the Cardinals next week in the NFC Championship game. If then tonight the Broncos win, I wonder when's the last time we had the 1 and 2 seeds in both conferences meeting in the championship.
And look at this. So Arizona, if Carolina, does what they should do here and win this game, Arizona going back to Carolina. Maybe, let me rephrase that. The AFC Championship game is obviously going to be a very highly anticipated game as well. But this Arizona at Carolina, in terms of how good the teams were throughout the year, might be one of the more highly anticipated matchups in that sense in a while. And that's completely opposite of last year's game when they played in the wild card round, and it was maybe the worst football game I've ever seen in my life. It was awful. It was so bad. That was one of those games that left you thinking, okay, say what you will, but there's no way you can convince me that Tim Tebow couldn't be a quarterback for the Cardinals last year, like over Ryan Lindley. Like he was. I feel bad. I don't know Ryan Lindley obviously, but his performance last year was all-time not good one. So
wasn't the best.
Right. So when we look at this, anyway, the Cardinals, Green Bay, we kind of alluded to it earlier in the show. Green Bay, Arizona wasn't necessarily all that it was cracked up to be early. It was close and competitive, but it wasn't. Neither team was really playing at their best. One point, to kind of look at is last week we mentioned that even though this was the blowout last year, you kind of knew that if Green Bay went to Arizona again, it wasn't going to be the same. Like they weren't going to get embarrassed like they did 4 weeks ago. It just wasn't going to play out that way, and it absolutely didn't. Now, Arizona, scored late to take the lead. One of the things with like 2:30 left in the game in regulation, Arizona was up 4 and had the ball. It was second down, and Green Bay only had one timeout, I believe, or maybe they had used their only timeout so far. But Arizona, I think Green Bay had used their timeout. Arizona passed the ball, and it was incomplete, and it stopped the clock. And what had to happen then was that they ended up kicking a field goal, but it left like 30 to 40 seconds left on the clock that Green Bay wouldn't have had normally. Now, you can say that, but it's one of those things. I found it amusing that the announcer at that point ripped Bruce Arians, yet at the end of the game they were talking about how he's one of the great play callers of all time. On the shovel pass, they're like, oh, such a great play call from a great play caller, and you're just like, literally 10 minutes ago you were ripping this guy for his play calling, and now you're calling him a great play caller. Like, Bruce Arians doesn't care.
No, why would he?
Right. But
all he did is take a team that historically has been awful, taking the 3 straight 10 wins,
right.
10-plus win seasons.
They were awful in the playoffs last year because they were so great, and then Carson Palmer
got hurt.
Right.
Now, wouldn't say that Carson Palmer's game last night was incredible. Now, he threw for almost 350 yards, 349, but he had 2 interceptions, which were huge.
One in the end zone, too.
Right. Yeah. So it wasn't the best game from Palmer. I'm happy for him, though. As you mentioned at the beginning of the show, the Cardinals are undefeated as the Arizona Cardinals at home. This is Carson Palmer's first playoff victory.
Yeah.
He's never won a playoff
When I
game
heard that last
night,
I was like, no way. And then I thought about it. I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Injured.
But right.
Injured. You know, like, you look at when he's been in the playoffs, he's either been injured or got injured, and the team had lost. So I'm happy for him. It was an interesting game. I saw the crappy, boring part at the beginning. You saw the interesting stuff
I tuned in
at the
and
end.
saw the literally 2 Hail Marys. And I'm kind of glad Green Bay scored that way. 1, I got to see it. And 2, it probably should have been a pass interference call on the 3rd down when it was 3rd and 20 for Green Bay. And they didn't call it. Okay, but then on the very next play, on 4th and 20, they convert for like 60 yards or whatever, out to essentially midfield, and then it's all sets up, the crazy Hail Mary play. Also, they also ripped Arians for, and not that he's calling plays on both sides at the end of the game, but Arizona brought pressure at the end. They didn't rush 1 or 2 guys and put everyone back. I find this interesting because one of the things that people said, basically they broke down when the Packers beat the Lions earlier this year on a Hail Mary. They said, the Lions made 2 mistakes. 1, you got to have guys back there. Calvin Johnson should be back there to knock the ball down. And 2, you should have they shouldn't rush 1 guy. They should have brought pressure. Well, they brought pressure, and they have arguably their best DB in Peterson there. And they don't make the play. Janis goes up and makes the play. And it's crazy because the ball actually comes out. You can see it right here. The ball comes out, but it doesn't hit the ground. No. And then he regains control. The ball's not hitting the ground.
He tried. That would have been an interesting ruling right there.
Right, because I don't know that he ever had control. So, like, technically, it's not like he,
right there.
He had it.
Control
right. See, I don't think he does.
And then he goes to knock it out, but
right,
man,
exactly.
See, to me, without the rule, that's a touchdown.
Absolutely, I was just gonna say that. That's a touchdown. You have to rule that a touchdown. And then everybody goes, Mason Crosby doesn't make this kick, right? He misses this kick.
This is the coin toss.
Right. And Aaron Rodgers is complaining that it doesn't flip. So the Cardinals had won. See, and Rodgers, they're complaining that they didn't get to call it again. Well, no, you called it. Like, we're just gonna flip it. And this play is just ridiculous.
Oh, God,
2 veterans, and then this part. This is the part that you've seen Larry Fitzgerald do over and over and over again. Oh my gosh!
This is the first.
That was a great play
kickoff,
by 29 to keep him out. That was the.
I think that was the first play of the overtime. After the kickoff.
It might have been the first play of overtime. Yeah.
Yeah, Fitzgerald had 176 receiving yards and a touchdown. He actually got called for an illegal block near the beginning of the game. It was in the first half, so you might not have seen it.
I did not.
It was a classic crack block by a receiver, but because I was like, how is that a penalty?
Now here's the touchdown.
He hit him in the head,
which is also technically a reception, but
right. He did hit him in the helmet, which I thought that was what they were calling the penalty on, but they actually called it. He actually went up the field, but then came back to make the block, and apparently that's illegal. I had never heard of that call before, but I'll take their word for it.
So that's funny because they also called one on Amendola or Edelman, one of them.
No, it was Amendola.
Yeah, and Belichick says it's a legal play.
Well, the Amendola one was on a special teams play.
Okay.
Now, this was actually during a red zone opportunity for the Cardinals when they got, I think, one of their field goals down because Larry Fitzgerald got them down there. Then the next play, he got a 15-yard penalty because it should have been. It was first and goal from the 5, and then he got a 15-yard penalty because he got
20.
Because he hit the guy good. I mean, the guy didn't go flying. He held his own, stumbled a bit, and wasn't hurt or anything. But they threw a personal foul.
Something I would kind of like to see, and I know this won't happen, but you know how so if there's a penalty there like let's say there's offsides on defense, it's half the distance to the goal. Like I would love to see that the offense can only be penalized the same amount that the defense could be. Like so that if there is like a false start, that they'd only go back 2.5 instead of like.
How about some of the stuff we talked about last night, where we in the NFL, any pass interference is at the spot of the foul. When an offensive team is back in their own end zone and there's a holding penalty or something, it's a safety. What if when the opposite is true, the offense is driving towards the opponent's goal to score points, they throw in the end zone, pass interference? Shouldn't that be a touchdown? Based on I know they don't want to give points on a play like that. Well, you're giving 2 points. I know people say, well, it's only 2 points. It's not 3, 6, or 7.
Right. And then I threw out there, well, what if you made it like 4 or 5 points?
Right.
And then
so pass interference in the end zone no longer get the ball at the 1. It's automatic 4 or 5 points.
But you're kicking off.
Or you can decline it.
Or you can decline it.
Do you get the ball at the 1 then?
No, you get like it would be like a.
What if they give you it at the 3? Kind of like the 2-point conversion.
A 3, and
you declined it,
you do the down over. So like if it was third down, it's still
you don't
third
get a
down.
first down.
Right? No first. See, I hate that every defensive penalty is an automatic first. I hate that. Like if it's 3rd and 20, there's a 5-yard defensive hold. I think that shouldn't be a first down. Now I understand, but like I don't know.
To me, I don't like that pass interference penalties are spot foul in the NFL to a certain extent.
Right.
Like once you get beyond I'd even stretch it to 20. Once you get beyond 20, you don't get more than 20 yards.
Right.
If I throw it from my 1 and the interference is down at the 5 and the other, no, that's a huge pass. But just for I'm sorry, how do you know he would have caught it?
Right.
Like you're giving them that just because then there'd be the people's contrarian saying, "Well, don't interfere with him." I understand all that, but I'm just for argument's sake, college isn't like that.
No,
high school's not like
that.
You get 15
and
yards.
Part of me is I don't want to see the guys anytime they get beat downfield just getting crushed and you eliminate the long plays, but at the same time, I don't want to see. I hate especially when it's a bad call. Yeah. You can see a 50-yard bad call, which just makes it even that much worse of a bad call.
But a 20-yard penalty is still, it's going to give you first down no matter what, and it's giving you 20 yards. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess anything under 20 yards, it's a spot foul. Anything over 20 yards, you get it 20 yards. From.
Or what if they even did half of the distance? So if it was 50-yard, it would be 25.
Well, that would force officials to do more math, and I think we're trying to limit that.
Yeah, that's probably a good call.
So those are the 2 games from yesterday. Right. Chiefs fall to the Patriots. Packers fall to the Cardinals. So the top seeds that played yesterday, they won. Today, we're seeing the same thing happen. We've mentioned it throughout the show so far. At halftime, the Carolina Panthers lead the Seattle Seahawks. This is the 1 seed versus the 6 seed. 31-0.
Yeah.
And this is just a beatdown.
This is one of those where they were talking this morning that the majority of bets were on the Panthers. However, the professional money was going on the Seahawks. This might be one where they're going to eat that. I think the Seahawks. I think the Panthers might have been a 1 or 2 point favorite at kickoff or something like that. They were talking about it on the radio, just how it was fluctuating because this was supposed to be. A lot of people said this was going to be the most interesting game this week.
Not so much.
Not looking that.
While
way.
You were filling the guys in on the audience on Packers Cardinals, I was looking up some info. When was the last time we saw the top 4 teams make the conference championship? So the 1 and 2 seed from both the AFC and the NFC. Well, actually. It dates back to a time, maybe you don't remember, maybe you do.
I didn't remember this. I remember the time.
It was actually the 2004 NFL season, which would have been the 2005 playoffs, when the top 4 seeds were in the AFC, number 1, Pittsburgh, number 2, New England, and number 1 in the NFC, Philadelphia, number 2, Atlanta. You
want to see some more crazy connections here. So Pittsburgh was the 1 seed in the AFC. I was at school in Pittsburgh at the time. The Friday before that Pittsburgh Jets game in the divisional round, so that would have been this round of games. I went and saw Mike and Mike broadcast live from a hotel that was 2 blocks from my apartment. I didn't really listen to ESPN radio at the time, but I knew my dad did, and so I went to see him with a friend of mine from college who was a big Jets fan, and we were there, and Greeny was wearing his Jets jersey and all that stuff. It was a good time. The Jets lose that game on 2 missed field goals. They missed 2 makeable field goals. The Steelers advanced to the AFC Championship game. This year, not that it was the Steelers, but we saw another missed field goal that has set up some crazy situations here. And you could argue that the Steelers shouldn't have won last week and won. Not, you can't blame the Steelers for that. That's, the just the way Cincinnati crumbled. Right. But, it's just kind of funny how that worked out. That, there were some crazy endings and things that played out in those playoffs, and we kind of see that again here. And so far, the 2 seeds won yesterday, and the 1 seed is winning big today.
Yeah, now I'm looking up some of the beatdowns like we see where, 31-0 is pretty big. When was the last time a team lost by 30-some in the divisional round or the championship games? It doesn't happen all that often, which probably shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Obviously, we saw it happen last year. In the AFC Championship game where New England destroyed Indianapolis 45-7, but that was the biggest point spread in the playoffs last year. Was that New England destruction of Indianapolis? Then we saw
clearly the balls weren't
deflated balls. Yeah, let's get into that. Let's get into that again. Then if you go a few years back, there was actually 2 huge blowouts. I think it was in 2000, or New England did it to Denver in following the 2011 season in 2012.
That was the Tebow year.
That was the Tebow. Yeah, Denver. It wasn't even an upset. Denver beat Pittsburgh 29-23. Denver was a 4 seed, Pittsburgh the 5, and then Denver went to New England, and New England housed them 45-10. Then 2 years before that, and this one will make Justin happy, there are a couple beatdowns in the playoffs. In the divisional round, actually in the NFC, both games were awful. The number 1 seeded Saints killed the Cardinals 45-14.
This is the year I was in. This was the year I was in Las Vegas because we bet on the Cardinals.
And you lost. Yeah. And the Vikings destroyed the Cowboys 34-3, and the Cowboys had beaten the Eagles the week before.
That did make me happy. Yes.
But yeah, Minnesota beat Dallas 34-3, and then I was happy the next week that New Orleans won because Brett Favre was the quarterback of that Vikings team.
And that is the infamous Bounty Gate game.
Yes. That is from that year. You're right. There's other games. You're going to see a couple games by 20, 3 to 4 touchdowns. That's a big thing. But when you get into 30 points, that's a huge difference. So those are a couple
playoff teams.
Playoff teams, right.
You're talking about teams, especially in the divisional round, because either these teams had a bye or they won their way into this round. You don't just sneak in here. So last week, people were complaining about some of the blowouts from last week, but you have teams that win terrible divisions. You don't have that in this round. So that's you should see more competitive games, and that's kind of goes back to that idea of where a lot of people will say that this round, even though you have the same number of games as last weekend, this is the round you want to see as opposed to last weekend.
Back in the 04 season, the 05 playoffs, when the ones that I talked about when we started this discussion, the last time the 2 number 1s and 2 number 2s made the championship games in a divisional round, Atlanta beat St. Louis by 30. Yeah. So 47-17. That was obviously at the Georgia Dome.
That was Mike Vick.
Yes. So some interesting look at some history here for that. I'd have to keep going back to see how often the top 4 teams make the championship game as the way it's supposed to be, if they truly are,
I was going to say, if it works out that way today, so if the Panthers and Broncos both advance, I'm sure you won't have to look it up because I'm sure someone will and let us know.
Maybe it'll be me.
Yeah, you'll probably know before then.
I'm probably going to do it when we're done here. But yeah, the Panthers, they're about to kick off. Seattle, I think, is going to receive the ball. Yeah, because the Panthers took the ball and 4 plays scored in the first half. So Seattle's going to get the ball. Really? They have to score.
Right. It's a 4-possession game if you count in some 2-point conversions.
Yeah, if you get all of them. If they score 4 touchdowns and get all the 2-point conversions, they win.
I don't doubt the Seahawks' ability to put up 32 points. They have to outscore the Panthers by 32 points in 30 minutes.
Think that we think Seattle can score. We don't think Seattle can stop them from scoring. Yeah. They have the number 1 defense the last 4 years in a row with 3 different defensive coordinators.
So in this game at the very beginning, they hadn't allowed a rushing touchdown on the road by a running back since November of 2014. And I was like, oh, that's, a season. I'm like, no, that's a full year. Like, that's,
year,
that's a long time ago.
Like 18 games, 19 games.
So when you look back, you're like, man, that's crazy. And then they haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher. Like, it's just all these crazy stats. And the Panthers had all that, like, in the first quarter.
Right.
Which just favors their ability in this game. It wasn't all just, like, big hit plays. They took it on their second touchdown drive. I believe they went and drove, like, 15 plays or something. Like, Carolina lined up and just pounded them, which is and
what's going on?
Seattle has the ball at the Carolina 13 already, so obviously some big plays there.
They scored,
and they scored a touchdown. Yes, and so here we go.
All right, so this is what happens. We got an unnecessary roughness. Oh, they got the ball at midfield.
Right. So Lockett kicks it.
He got to the 50. Oh,
right.
He ran into the 50, and they got a 15-yard penalty. So they had the ball to start the third quarter on the Carolina 35.
Right. Yeah, and then...
See, and that's the stuff that's going to absolutely...
Right. So,
7-yard pass, 6-yard pass.
Yeah, all no huddle here, so they're in a hurry. So
pass,
Seattle's going to score. Pass. It's just, I don't know that they can outscore them by 31. Or by 32.
See, and that exactly shows you how teams lose big leads like this.
Right.
You give up a special teams miscue to give up 50 yards, and then you tack on a penalty.
Right.
That's why you lose. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to lose. Maybe they'll
because
get
it was 31. But if it was 21, all of a sudden it's a 2-score game.
Yeah.
And you're just like, now here they may go for 2. Because I don't know.
I don't know. I don't have that sheet that tells you when to go for 2 and when not to go for 2. But anyway, Seattle finally got on the board. 4
touchdowns with the 2-point conversions win them the game as of right now.
First 90 seconds of the third quarter, Seattle scores, aided by a big return by the Pro Bowler Lockett, and the personal foul penalty on the Panthers set them up at the Carolina 35. They kicked the extra point. Hotchkiss got it through, so it's 31-7, 13-27 to play in that one.
Right. So now it's going to come down to Seattle's defense, at least right now. Like, can they get a lot of stops in this half? So we'll wait and see. Nothing they did in the first quarter really led us to believe that. They gave up 14 points in the first quarter, 17 points in the second quarter. So they're already doing better in the second half, but we'll wait and see. Because, this is one of those where Seattle could put together a run here, and then the Panthers score a touchdown late in the third or early in the fourth, and that's all it needs. Because they need to basically pitch a shutout here.
To me, if the Panthers get one touchdown,
it's
game's over.
Right.
Like, you're not going to score that many. I mean, I know it's happened. I know people will say, what was it, Bills Oilers.
Right.
Is always the one that people, but it happened one time.
Exactly. It happened one time. So
that's where
that started a lot earlier than just in the second half. Like that started
end of the second quarter, I think, is when the Bills started to make that comeback.
Frank Reich from Lebanon.
Frank Reich, right. He filled in for Jim Kelly. Frank Reich just got fired as the Chargers offensive coordinator.
Right. Somebody had to go, yeah.
So anyway, that's the game 3 or 4. We talked a little bit about the Steelers-Broncos matchup tonight, but we'll say a few more things here before we go. I guess actually we didn't do this for any of the games because it was after the fact or during the game. What is your prediction for tonight? I know we're both kind of waffling and back and forth, but if you have to pick an outcome, what's it going to be?
I picked the Broncos because that's where my heart's at. I think the Broncos are going to win.
Does Jamie know that?
She probably does, and I wore blue and orange today, even though she has her Steelers jersey on.
Yes, my wife has her Steelers shirt on as well.
I say the Broncos win 27-20.
Broncos win 27-20?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to also pick the Broncos because that's who, as of right now, before the game starts.
It wouldn't surprise me if the Steelers win like 27-13 or something like that.
I think I'm going to go with Denver just because even though at the top of the show we talked about, looking back on their schedule, things don't stand out too great for Denver. Even though they were 12-4, they had bad losses. Their wins weren't that great. Manning missed how many games, both with injury and being benched because Osweiler was at least getting the W's. Now he comes back in. What's it going to be? Are we going to see the Peyton Manning from 5 years ago? Well, I guess not 5 years ago because I think he was injured 5 years ago. But you understand what I'm trying to say.
Maybe that's the Peyton Manning we're going to see. They need to run the ball. They need to run the ball tonight. If they can run the ball, then that's That's really good for him because that's not just going to be good this week. That's good next week, too.
I don't think we see a blowout like this afternoon game. I think we see a game similar to the games from yesterday.
I'm telling you, if there's a blowout this afternoon, I think it's the Steelers winning. If it's a close game, that's more of the Gary Kubiak style, I believe. So I'm going with the Broncos. That could be more of my heart talking. I hope they win. I'm not very confident in it. Honestly, when I look at it, before the games, and it's easy to do that, I picked the Patriots. I picked the Cardinals. Well, I thought those would both be decent games, and they were. I picked the Panthers. I thought that was a toss-up, but I picked the Panthers. And I picked the Broncos, but the Broncos is the one I was the least confident in. I feel like I'm talking myself into picking the Broncos. And partially because everyone's picking again. Everybody's picking them. That's usually a bad sign.
The Broncos?
Yeah. Like everybody thinks the Steelers don't have a shot because of their injuries. No. If it was the other way around, if Ben was out, I'd pick the Broncos like 80%.
Last week, the games were easy to me. Like when I made my picks, I thought they were easy. I went 3-1, and the loss was the stupid Vikings because I really thought the Vikings were going to win that game, and I feel like they should have. But I'll take that loss. This week, I was 50-50 on all of them. I almost took the Chiefs. I didn't. I took the Patriots. I almost took the Packers. I didn't. I took the Cardinals. The one that I was most confident in, and then maybe this is because I didn't want to pick them, is I was going with the Panthers no matter what. Even though at times I was like, man, it doesn't make any sense. Seahawks have been so dominant the last 2 years. They snuck away last week. They play so well when they're on a roll like this. But I went with the Panthers, and now I'm really happy I did. Right now I'm sitting on the Broncos. I have an hour and a half to make a decision of do I want to change that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. As of right now,
I'm just going to ride
sticking
with
Denver.
Yeah.
Right. I rode out with the Patriots and Cardinals after kind of thinking, what should I do? What should I do? I'm feeling I should stick with Denver.
Right.
I want to see Manning do it.
Right.
Now, do I think he can beat...
I know, that's the thing.
Do I think he can beat the Patriots next week? Do I think he can beat one of the NFC teams? I don't know.
Right. I don't know either.
But as long as one of these teams... That's a problem
for future Justin.
Right. As long as one of these teams tonight beats the Patriots next week, I'll be good. Because
and as much as I'm rooting against the Steelers today, if they win, I'm all on board for the Steelers next week. Like... And that kills me to say it.
Hop aboard the train.
Kills me to say it, but that's what you got to do.
Well, see, with the outcome, knowing the Cardinals already won, and that it's likely that the Seahawks are going to lose and the Panthers are going to win, one of the Steelers or Broncos has to go. There's only one team left that I don't want to see win, and that's the Patriots.
Right, yeah.
So, I'll have 3 out of 4 chances.
Yeah, Patriots are there.
I know you don't want to see the Steelers win,
But
if they beat the Patriots, there's an NFC team that can beat them.
Right. And that's
not to say that
if it's Patriots Steelers, I'm rooting for the NFC team regardless of who it is. But you want
the Steelers to beat the Patriots.
Oh, absolutely. No,
I'm trying to reiterate as much as possible for my uncle to hear us say over and over, we want this team to win. And let it be on the record, and it was on the show last year. I rooted for the Patriots last year.
I can't believe our friendship actually survived
But this year,
that.
at this point, no way. I am all on board with Panthers, Cardinals, Steelers, Broncos. Like, no matter what happens. Let's see, in terms of jerseys, how I can root for them. I have a Cardinals jersey.
Fitzgerald?
No, Tillman.
Oh, okay.
I don't have a Panthers jersey that fits, I'm sure, because the Kerry Collins days in Carolina were a long time ago.
That's all right. I want to see it. You'll be breaking out Cam Newton's move, Superman ripping the shirt.
I might have a Champ Bailey Broncos jersey, so I think I can sport that.
I think you do have a Broncos jersey.
And I have a Palomalo jersey.
Yeah.
So, and I have Patriots jersey, but I'm not rooting for them, so I'm not going to wear it. So it'll be interesting. If the Patriots go, I'm rooting for either the Panthers or Cardinals.
Break out a Drew Bledsoe jersey.
If the Broncos go, I'm rooting for the Broncos.
Yeah.
If it's Steelers NFC, my family's going to tell me my wife's side of the family is going to tell me I have to root for the Steelers.
No way.
So
can't do it.
So we'll see. That's a problem for future Joey to worry about.
Yes. So, all right. Well, anyway, we'll see how these games unfold. And Panthers converted on a 3rd and 7. It looked like they might go 3 and out against following that touchdown. That's when you talk about. Even if they don't, like we said, the touchdown kind of iced it. Even if they get a drive down here and get a field goal, that's huge because then that touchdown automatically means they only made up 4 points, not 7. So they just have to. The Panthers don't have to win the second half; they just have to lose it slowly. That's basically what it comes down. So make everything take time, and that's where the running game will help them, I think. So.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Well.
So I think I just want to make sure there isn't anything that I'm forgetting. I know we said it last week, but happy belated birthday to your dad. He celebrated a big one in the middle of this week.
Yeah.
Your sister-in-law is coming up here
Thursday. Yep.
And I was probably going to say it on the show next week, but just so I remember now, I'll say happy third birthday to my daughter, who will be celebrating on Friday. She'll be 3. Natalie turns 3 this coming Friday. It is crazy. So that's out there. But I think other than that, that's it. We'll be back next week with episode 199.
Whoa.
We'll be talking the conference championship games. We'll I would think, be looking to do it in the evening, since if we do it early, we could preview them.
Yeah, we'll see.
It's kind of more fun to talk about when at least something has happened and we know what's going to go on. So stay tuned to our Facebook and Twitter pages, or talk to one of us of when the show is next week. It'll probably either be mid-afternoon or later in the evening, at least following the first game, maybe during the second game. But stay tuned for all of that, and we'll be back next week to talk the conference championships. For more from us, go to jmnjrradio.com or joemaysandjraff.com. I already gave you the Twitter handles to follow. Go and do that. But I think that's it. So thanks for joining us. That wraps up the 198th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
We hope you tune in every Sunday for our take on sports. Until next time, I'm J-Raff.
And I'm Joe Mays. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Don't forget, you can download each episode of the show from the podcast section of the iTunes Store. We'll see you next time, and thanks again for listening.